Welcome everybody to the Historical Society meeting. This is Dave Donbrock. He's the Assistant Fire Chief and he'll be telling us all about the history of the Portland Fire Department.
All right, as Barb said, I'm Dave Donbrock. I'm the Assistant Chief of the Portland Fire Department. I'm not originally from Portland. I'm a transplant to Portland. I was born and raised in Quincy, Michigan. Although I did spend, and forgive me for this, but I did spend about 12 years in Ohio. But that's where I first got on the fire department. I have been a firefighter since 1989. And in my years, my time's coming slowly to an end here within the next year or so. But there comes a point in time where getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning in the middle of February to go fight a house fire is just no longer appealing. But you know, I've been doing it a long time, and it's been a great thing. I've always been a paid-on-call firefighter, and paid-on-call firefighters mean that we're paid when we go on a run. And the officers receive a stipend throughout the year because we're the ones that have to write all the reports and do all the paperwork, so that's a little bit more work. But as the nation as a whole, 70% of our firefighters are volunteer. Portland is 100% volunteer, and as are all the other departments in the county with the exception of Ionia, and they're what's called public safety. They do have 2 full-time firefighters. They're during the day. The rest of the police department is part of the fire department. So when they have a fire, the police fight fire, which isn't an uncommon thing, believe it or not. Kalamazoo's like that, Wyoming's like that. So as I said, I've been doing this since 1989. I've gone up through the ranks. I was also on Kentwood Fire Department over by Grand Rapids for a number of years. And then my wife and I moved to Portland here in 2002. And I got on the Portland Fire Department, been here ever since. There's been a lot of changes on the Portland Fire Department because we are no longer the Portland Fire Department. Haven't been for about 15 years. We're the Portland Area Fire Authority. And so what happened there, we were part of the city, we were a department of the city. The ambulance was part of the department, and then the townships, Portland Township, Danby Township, wanted to play a larger role in the management of the department, and that's when we became an authority. So there are 2 members from each district, 2 from the city, 2 from the Portland Township, and 2 from Danby Township, who are on a board and they control our department. And they have done an excellent job. Kathy Parsons, a lot of you may know her. She's one of the members. But they just have done an excellent job. Most of them have been on there this entire time. And over the course since we became the Portland Area Fire Authority, we have replaced every major piece of apparatus you see here. That is not a cheap endeavor. That end apparatus, we bought it in 2019. Since COVID, the cost of fire engines increased roughly 50%. So what cost $750,000 in 2019 now costs $1.2 million. If we were to replace that engine as it sits here. The tanker was replaced in 2015, I believe. The tanker we use for rural fires, you can see a dump in the back. There's also 2 chutes on the side. One comes out either side, there's a camera above each chute, and behind over here, this giant yellow thing we have out drying, and that's what that smell is right now. We had training last night, and we were practicing drafting and pumping. And that drop tank, we set alongside the road. We set it, it's called a single lane drop tank. So like on a country road, we can put an engine, and we put that drop tank right in front of it. And this bladder will fill up. This thing will hold 3,500 gallons of water. That tanker holds 3,000 gallons of water. So we have a 90-degree fitting that comes on here, then we have hard suction that comes off of the engine, and we just suck it right out of there. It's like a giant 5-inch straw. Sometimes getting that 5-inch straw to quit sucking air can be kind of a task. So, and I know we're here for history things, but I wanted you to see where we are now, and then we'll go back in time as we go. So that tanker was a major purchase for us. I think our last tanker held less than half that amount of water. So in a rural situation, the waters remain supplied. When somebody calls us for mutual aid in a rural setting, that's what they're after first, is that thing right there. And we are very gifted out in the rural areas here, because Berlin Orange has 3,000 gallons. Sunfield has 6,000 gallons. You know, we have large tankers around us. In fact, that tanker went to the accident with us up on 96 over the weekend, because we knew it was a large fire. And there's definitely, once we got out there, we were not leaving with those engines. And so it also came out with us. Engine 5, which is right here, this is our newest engine. We got that last year. And that was roughly $800,000 for that engine. And all of these, those two are already paid for. This one will be paid for very quickly. And that's the management of the funds that are PAHS board. They are the quiet, unsung heroes in the background who keep us moving. We've upgraded all of our gear. This is our modern day gear. Every firefighter is assigned their own set of gear. There's multiple layers to it. And they used to soak this thing in PFAS. So for the last 25 to 30 years, I've been wearing PFAS-soaked clothing that I was not aware was going to give me cancer someday. But you know, it makes it water resistant. That's what PFAS does. And roughly $1,000, $1,200 in gear for every firefighter. Once you add everything up, once you throw in an SCBA, and the SCBA is another $3,000, $3,500. The SCBAs, we're going to talk a little bit about that, because I want you to see where we've gone. We've got an SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus, from the early 1900s, the original that you were able to get. We still have ours, and it's upstairs. But these are actually coming to an end here very soon. Everything you see has a shelf life, 10 years max. These we get a little bit longer out of. The fire engines, you can get 30 years out of a fire engine if you take good care of it. The fire engine we just retired was in 1991. And it still lives. We sold it to Zeeland schools for $1. And it is in the training academy at the Zeeland Career Center for firefighters. So they're teaching kids to be firefighters. So it's over there living this good life. And the good thing about fire apparatus is they still look pretty new when you sell them. They spend except when you use them, they spend their entire life indoors. And every 10 years they get new tires. The tires look like brand new when we replace them. But these fire apparatus, this is what we'll be retiring soon. The new ones aren't that much different from these. When we upgraded to the Scots, that was a major change, and you'll see the difference when we go upstairs. These have 4,500 pounds of air in them. It's a carbon wrap bottle, and they're much smaller and lighter. Over the course of time, everything got lighter. Right now, we're wearing about 50 pounds of gear. Prior to that, we would wear 60 pounds of gear. So when you're fully masked up and you've got an air pack on, and you're climbing up ladders in the middle of the winter trying to get to places, it can be a little awkward. So the lighter, the better, the faster you can move, the more efficient you can be. One thing that has maybe gotten us in trouble a little bit with the gear is that it is fire resistant, and it's kind of hard to tell sometimes when maybe you've gone too far into a house fire. You know, the old guys back in the day used to judge it by when their ears would start to burn. So we don't have that luxury anymore. Everything is encapsulated. So you don't realize it until you start seeing off-gassing coming off of your clothing. Or you just finally think to yourself, my eyeballs are really, really dry right now. And that's when you think maybe you should pull out a little bit. But then ultimately, a lot of us don't pull out, and I didn't grab my helmet, until the visor on your helmet starts to melt. Then you know it's time to get out. But, and that's what we do for fun. That's our part-time job. So, it's a lot of training. We have educational credits that we have to earn. You're required to have X amount of training over a course of 3 years. You have to have proof that you had that training. If you were on the ambulance as well, that's more continuing education credits. In Portland, we are not first responders on the fire department. We are the only fire department in the county who's not first responders, because we have them. And we've always had them, so we've never had to be, but I think that time's coming to an end. I think eventually within the next decade, you're going to see a couple full-time firefighters down here. You know, a lot of us work outside of town, And the worst time to have a fire in the volunteer fire department is somewhere around 2:30ish, because the second shift guys have left town to go to work, and the first shift guys are not back in town yet. So you've got there's not a lot of people that work in the city of Portland anymore. And so we do have some third shift guys though. We've never not been able to respond to a fire, but everyone in the county is really low on manpower during the day. So just having two guys, I keep saying guys, two firefighters on a truck is a major thing. We do have a substantial number of females on our fire department. It's not uncommon at all anymore. Kim has been on our department since the 80s. She was the original female firefighter. At one point, 25% of our firefighters were female. Quite often, people will come to Portland, and because we have the ambulance, we have the fire, and this is where they get their initial training, they get their experience, and then they move on to a neighboring full-time department. We are very fortunate to be between Grand Rapids and Lansing. We can commute to Grand Rapids to work, we can commute to Lansing to work. Same thing with the fire departments. I don't believe there's a single full-time fire department in Lansing or Grand Rapids area that does not have someone from Portland on it that started here. I think we put out a good product, meaning the people who move on from here. We follow the rules, and we tick off some of our neighbors sometimes because they don't follow the rules, and we put them in line, and if they don't want to get in line, then go home. We don't need that kind of crap on the fire grounds. So this is where we're at now. Communications are excellent. When we have a fire, these are pagers that we wear. They set off a tone from the dispatch office, which makes this go beep, beep, beep. And sometimes it's extremely loud, as my wife can tell you. And other times she just tunes it out, and when I'm coming out of the house, she's like, "Where are you going?" And I said, "The pager went off, I'm going to fire." But especially loud in the middle of the night, which is what it's expected to be. But we also have apps on our phone. Believe it or not, we have a fire app, and dispatch updates the fire app. We've got maps on the fire app, Zach Walters' door point in the fire app, and every hydrant around here is marked. Every place you put a boat into the river is marked. Every place you get out of the river is marked. Every major thing that we need to know about possible rescues or accidents, he's got in there. We can zoom in. The trailer park just outside of town. You know, it's a little confusing in there how they've got it set up. We got the map on the app. You just click it and pull it up. It's really nice, and we can track our vehicles in it. Every one of the vehicles had a tag in it, and we can watch them move. We can see where they're at. And we recently upgraded to 800 communication network, which we are now all on the same radio network within the county, fire, EMS, and police. That was first a directive by President Bush right after the towers came down. So it took a long time for us to get to the point we were. Once again, it's all about the money. It costs a lot of money to upgrade those radios, and the towers that we have to put up are roughly $1.8 million per tower. So the towers for the communication for the first responders are also expensive. But that's what we have taxes for, I guess. And part of your cell phone bills pay for part of that as well. We all have a charge on our cell phone bill that goes to the county commissioners to the 911 dispatch center. So that's a tax inside your phone bill. You probably weren't even aware it was there. But that's where that goes. We recently had an addition to Engine 7. You know, I mentioned February once. And I don't know how many times I thought, it sure would be nice to have a hot cup of coffee out here. Well, Kathy Parsons lost the bet, and we now have a Keurig on our engine. So she lost the bet, she gifted it to us, and we always keep a good supply of water. Our main objective at any situation is our firefighters come home. Every single one of them come home with us. And then it's personal protection property, but we do our best to keep them hydrated and keep them moving. Because the opposite end of the spectrum of that is, imagine wearing your warmest outside outfit, your Carhartt, your snowsuits, whatever, in the middle of July and do calisthenics in the front yard. That's very similar to what we do. That gets very, very hot in the summertime. And it gets very stinky in the summertime too. So this is where we started out. We still have a couple things that we need to upgrade. We have new grass trucks coming. that's probably a good thing because we blew up one of the grass trucks 2 weeks ago. So it had to happen 4 months before the new ones arrived. So we're down to one grass truck at the moment. And then we have the boat that will eventually upgrade to. It's for four-wheel drive trucks. So if we get back in the field, if we have field fires. So it actually got stuck, but they're from the early 90s. And they're diesels, and it got stuck, and then the transmission doesn't work anymore. So actually, we got stuck. Lions Mirror Fire Department was pulling us out with theirs. They got stuck, so the wrecker came to get us. He got stuck, and then they got the wrecker out, and he just pulled us all out like a train going out the driveway. It happens. But one of the things, and there's several areas that I would like to team up with the Historical Society, and we've been in some preliminary discussions about that, is, you know, we've got all this stuff down here, and no one ever sees it. And our fire department sees it, but, you know, a lot of people don't appreciate history anymore. And so we're in a pitch generation where you just pitch everything. Everything is disposable. Well, like when we replace those, we should probably keep one of those. And because eventually, I mean, it's not antique to us, but it's going to be an antique here in another 10 years because they're not going to be in existence anymore. They're all going to be pulled out of the stations. And like this fire engine here, that fire engine is a 1942 fire engine. I don't know if this is true or not, but but I was told we had it ordered before Pearl Harbor. And that's the only reason we got it, is because it was already in construction. It was being manufactured before the war ever took off. So we were able to get that. And that ran in service up until the mid-70s. It was used a long time. And that's not untypical for us. We get our money's worth out of these apparatus, that's for sure. Now, up here on the board, you're going to see a roster. There's two banners up there on the wall, and to the right are the honorary rosters. And you're going to hear me mention that because that roster has been around a very, very long time. And initially, you had to be on 5 years in order to get your name on the honorary board. Once you retired, a minimum of 5 is the minimum of 20 now. And back then, I believe the dues, I would have to look, but we'll look when we're upstairs, but I believe the dues started out at 25 cents a month. We are now at $5 a month. It's still not that much. So the Fire Association, whenever you see us fundraising, that's not the fire department. That's the Firefighters Association. The Firefighters Association started the fire department in 1876. So next year will be our 150th anniversary. And so they started, the Firefighter Association did it. They ran everything in the fire department with minimal involvement from the city. And it was that way for a very, very long time. They decided who got on, who wasn't going to stay on, and they developed the infrastructure and made us into what we are today. And now the fire, we don't run it anymore, but the firefighters still have the association. And we still hold monthly meetings. We still make our minutes every month. It's now on a thumb drive. But we have our minutes from the very first meeting from 1876. So, and I'll show you those upstairs as well. One additional thing that we do, and this has been, we mess up sometimes on the fire department. So if you mess up too badly, every year at the safety meeting, before the meeting, we have a vote on Firefighter of the Year, and we have a vote for the Leaky Hose Award. And it's done in secret. We have the nominations. So if you mess something up, you get your name on here, and then this has to be above your locker for an entire year. And you display it proudly during that entire year. And thankfully, we haven't had a lot of major mess ups. I mean, I got it because I wore 2 different shoes one night. That's how picky we've got. Although we've got a couple good ones this year. Namely, one of the fire trucks is gone.
Okay, you're gonna have to elaborate on that.
The grass truck, he got it stuck and the transmission went out. So, and there's a lot of good pictures of that too. So, you know, that shows up nonstop. So we have a lot of fun as well. The fire service, I don't know, you hear about brotherhood and sisterhood. It truly is. They become your family members. My closest friends are from the fire department. I mean, we spend so much time together. I mean, that's just the way it works. And you can learn who you can count on and who you can't. And those are the people you want in the fires next to you, are those people you can count on. And we've got an awesome group of people on this department.
You do.
So the citizens of Portland can be self-assured that we've got a good group.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to go upstairs to the meeting room. And are you guys going to hold your meeting first, or?
Just a short one.
All right, that's fine. We can do that. All right, let's go upstairs.
All right.
Members of our fire department, he's Lieutenant on Fire Department Jake Schaefer was helping a friend of his clean out a house they recently purchased. The house used to belong to a gentleman by the name of Richard Hanley. And Richard was a woodworker. This is a map of Ionia County from the late 1800s, early 1900s. He doesn't know for sure, and they were afraid to unroll it.
Oh.
Because he very clearly wrote this is very delicate, handle with care. And he knew that this was coming up, Jake did, and he said, hey, Dave from the fire department can get it to the Historical Society. So they wanted you guys to have it. The only thing is that if you unroll it and there's thousands of dollars rolled up inside, that Richard Hanley's family gets it. But this belongs to you guys now.
All right. Thank you very much.
You made a really nice box for it.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, they gave one out belonging to the Historical Society.
Yeah, well, he made our china cabinet that's down in the library.
Oh, he did wonderful stuff.
So downstairs, I mentioned the Firefighters Association, and when we have fundraisers, in the past we've had high school scholarships. That's what we do. Monitors, thermal imaging monitors for the fire department. Now we have big ones, but the big ones are uber expensive, but we only have one per engine, and so we bought personal thermal imaging cameras, so every firefighter on the first engine can have their own thermal imaging camera inside the fire. And we also buy things that aren't necessary for the fire department to function, but it makes us look good, like these uniforms. The Firefighter Association pays for these uniforms. The taxpayers do not need us to wear nice looking uniforms to have a fire department. So we take care of that ourselves. That doesn't come from the tax money. So those are the kind of things that the association does. And they have done so over the years. Now, at the very beginning, a lot of the money was raised specifically for the fire department. So what I did is out of these two volumes here, this is the first volume, and this is the second volume. I did not make it all the way through the second volume. I have roughly 50 years from 1876 to the 1920s. And during that course of time, you see the progression of society. You know, electricity came in, cars came in. We moved from horses. In fact, our first hose carts on the fire department weren't pulled by horses; they were pulled by people. They were called hose carts. So when you see in this, what I did, I went through it, and everything pertinent that I thought was, it mentioned a business name or a name I recognized, or monumental movements within the fire department, or something involved with the history of the city I put in here. And I'm hoping as we go through here, if you guys, who puts out the Facebook page for the Historical Society? Is that person here?
No.
Ed, you do a phenomenal job. I absolutely love that. I find that every day. And I very much enjoy that. So thank you for all of you that do that. And thank you for holding on to the history of our community. I think it's important. But we recently remodeled up here. We built this room over here, our EMS, but added more full-time people, and so we needed more sleeping quarters. And so everything is still in disarray. And my wife's employer just recently donated a glass cabinet for us to display some of this stuff in. I just need to figure out how to haul it here now. But that it'll start to look a little nicer and better cared for than what it does right now. It's been in a pile in the back for a while now. I had to straighten it up a little bit before here. But the two of my favorite pictures, I laid out some pictures around here, was I don't know if this is the original fire hall, and I can pass this around. I believe this was located somewhere across from where City Hall is now, if I have my facts straight. And then this picture is from 1912, I think. 1917, I'm sorry. And my wife and I took this picture along with that hood over there to the Antique Roadshow. And when it was in Grand Rapids, we were lucky enough to get tickets, and I took some of the original buckets. And we came that close to getting on television. The producer came up and asked the lady who was talking to us if she was going to put us on, and she said, I don't have enough to talk about, I can't keep the session running long enough. So otherwise we'd made it, but there's a picture of somebody wearing that in this picture in 1917.
Oh, yeah. He doesn't even look like a person wearing it.
No, he does
And
not.
they didn't even put his name on it.
And
Ridiculous.
we'll discuss, since we've got this on here a little bit, MSA is a manufacturer of breathing apparatus. Mine Safety Appliance is what that originally stood for. Because originally, all their breathing apparatus was for the mines. And I saw something on, I believe, the Discovery Channel on this hood. And then I said, we've got one of those. And there was a black man who made that and designed it. But you know, racism was so strong back then that no one would buy the doggone thing from him. Well, there was a big accident in a mine, so he self-dispatched himself, and they couldn't get these miners out. He put on that hood and started pulling people out, and then all were like, we're gonna buy some of those. And so that's where MSA came from, the Mine Safety Appliance. And that was our original breathing apparatus, and it had colored lenses up here, I assumed, so you can't see in a fire anyhow, so it doesn't matter what you put up there. But maybe to keep the fire down, but this would drag on the ground like a long hose, because you know, they always tell you to get close to the ground. That's what that's doing, it's pulling the fresh air off of the ground. So that's what they would wear when they were going to the fire. And so we're very fortunate to still have that. And but to this, I've highlighted a few areas. If somebody sees anything at any point that they want to just shout out to it, you know, a certain building or any reference to anything. Now the writing in these books are incredibly beautiful. It's also very hard to decipher. I had a flashlight holding it straight down so I could see better even, trying to read this. I did it night after night. I did it lunchtime at work. But the first page is the only thing I'll read in entirety, because that's when we first started. And on June 12, 1876, and this is, I put what page these were on inside the books, because the pages are numbered. The first meeting was held at J.C. Carson's building on the west side of Kent Street with 29 men in attendance. Then they created the following positions. Meeting was held over Bogue and Company store. I'm assuming that's where Bogue Flats came from. Was that family there? A letter was read from the Bean Manufacturing Company. Bean was a fire apparatus manufacturer for, I don't know, 100 years. In fact, I think our 42 has a Bean plant. And saying an engine would be in town on the 21st to confer with the village board about purchasing a Bean fire engine. When they say fire engine, that's a hand-drawn cart. That was your fire engine. A committee was created to discuss what kind of style of uniform the fire company would wear. So immediately, they weren't worried about this stuff. They were worried about how good they looked. You know, because these guys were in lots and lots of parades. They would get together with the different organizations in town, and they would just throw a parade. Friday night, nothing to do, let's have a parade. And that's what they would do. And so they decided they need to name the fire company. And this is also where each member had to pay 25 cents. And that would ultimately become their monthly dues. They were very strict back then. If you weren't at the meetings, there's a whole part in here where they talk about how they eight-balled you and kicked you off if you didn't follow the rules and do everything appropriately. The meeting was held over Bogue and Company store. The name for the fire company was established as the Wabana Engine Company No. 1. Every one of our fire engines had the decal on it. It says Wabana Fire Engine Company. So we still use it. And we sold one of our engines we had a great big four-wheel drive monstrosity of a fire truck. It was one of those things that I believe when they bought it was a really cool idea. It was a terrible fire engine. You couldn't reach anything on it. It was too tall. And I don't even know if it ever fought a house fire. But it was our rescue engine. That's what we had all of our rescue equipment on. But it was a great big four-wheel drive Pierce engine, and someplace in Montana bought it. and redid the whole thing, put on LED lights, and that sticker is still on there. They left that on there because they recognize the historical factor on it. Meeting was held over at Boat Company again. Received 2 quotes for the fire engines, one from Button Engine Company for $800 and one from Toledo Engine Company for $1,000, but the Toledo engine included 500 feet of hose. The room at the Hinman Building, south of Blanchard's Morehouse, can be used for meetings at no cost. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Hinman Building? Maybe not, maybe so. Okay. The Constitution and bylaws. Now, over in Ionia, we tried to find information on this because our police chief, her husband, is the police chief over there as well. So, which he's also the fire chief. So they tried to find stuff on this Slant Engine Company number 2 and Wolverine Hose Company number 2 from the city of Ionia. Notice nobody called themselves Ionia Fire Department, the Portland Fire Department back then. And that just seemed to be the way they did it. Now if they had fines for not attending the fire call, if you arrived at a meeting intoxicated, you got a $1 fine. And over the course of time, you know, the fire service at one point in time became like the boys club. And I caught just the very tail end of that in the 80s. Father Jacob would walk in the front door. We had a priest named Father Jacob who was retired. And he was our pastor on the fire department. We'd be in the meeting room, this was in Ohio, and you could hear bam, bam. And he had a real deep voice. He'd say, Chief, brought the boys some beverages. There'd be 2 30-packs of beer out there sitting on the counter. So that's what we had, this wick cheddar cheese and horseradish. And we would eat that on Ritz crackers and drink that beer. And then we'd all go home. And we stunk so bad. But that's what they did back then. And there is no alcohol in most of the fire departments anymore. Although you get in the East Coast, they actually still have fire halls that they run out for weddings, and that's how they support their funds. All the firefighters take turn being bartenders. You know, there's a wedding there every week, so it's still part of the game. Now on December 6, 1877, a triangle was ordered. That triangle was to alert everybody for the fire. And then ultimately they started hearing from Hastings Fire Department, they have a triangle and it's forward. And they don't like it, which I guess, you know, Portland wasn't that big back then, but big enough, I don't think you hear a triangle all over town in the middle of the night while you're sleeping. So they ultimately did decide that the triangle stunk, and they did ultimately take it down too. But in addition to that, well, let's go to, well, there's another note there. In December 14th, 1877, it was reported that firefighters, they wanted to be first on the scene, so they weren't putting their clothes on. So they arrived at a recent alarm without pants, hats, or boots. So they were told that they were not to do that anymore. And the first mention of a fire hall was noted on December 21st, 1877. And then all the churches got involved. So when we'd have a fire, somehow they would notify the churches and they would ring the bells. So that would alert everybody. And you got to remember, back at this point in time, everything was wooden. The buildings were made of wood, and the roofs were made of wood. And we heated with fire. We cooked with fire. So they would set people out on fire watch overnight to make sure to see whose roofs were catching on fire from the embers coming. Fires were very common back then, and it would take out sections of the town. And downtown, and in these older brick buildings, those are intended to be burned out. So inside these brick buildings downtown, that's called ordinary construction. And if you see where the floor joist is for the second floor, there will be knocks in the wall. And that's where the floor joists slide in. Well, the floor joists are cut at an angle at the top. So when they burn, they can collapse and not take a brick with it, because they cut that angle in there. So if where the dance hall is at, where they put the dance studio upstairs, in the back stairway you can see those inserts where those used to be, where they've taken out part of the floor to put those in. So that's ordinary construction in the fire service. It's not so ordinary anymore. Back when they named all these different levels, it was ordinary. Now they started talking about the hook and ladder squad and 2 extinguisher squads. These guys were very much into the names of what you call things. I can't even guarantee they had hooks and ladders, but that's what they called it. The Baptist church started using theirs, and then the acid soda, they talked about on January 4th, 1878, how to use the acid soda fire extinguisher. So once you turn those over and you puncture it, and then you mix that up, it creates pressure inside this tank, and it'll throw foam. So that's how those would work. And now on January 11th, 1878, this is where they get the triangle installed, and it was not what they expected. Then they give a description of the uniform. Next year is going to be our 150th anniversary, and the fire department's going to live this up a little bit. We're going to enjoy the hype, and I want to get involved with your Facebook page. I would like to have some kind of posting pretty regularly about the fire department, mostly out of this stuff, that and this date, and that this happened. And one of the things we talked about doing, we actually put together a committee for what events we're going to hold. They talked about a fundraiser here in a little bit about having a play and a couple different plays, and they had a lot of plays as fundraisers. So I came up with the idea of getting with the civic players, and the firefighters all said, hell no, we are not making no play. So that went down the whole number.
How about the hose war on the bridge? You've seen that photo?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Yep, and we still have water ball competitions. We've got a bunch of trophies out there from, we'll get a bunch of people in here and then they'll get into water ball and then they'll lose interest, and so it comes and goes. But water ball is the thing, it's a metal ball on a cable, and you usually have to have dump trucks hold it in place, and every once in a while you got to move the dump trucks because the water will bounce the dump trucks back, and you have to push the ball back and forth, and you score points depending on how far you get it. So it's a lot of fun, but it comes and goes, like I said.
So are you gonna have these red shirts with velvet?
We were talking about getting some made, not one for everybody, but something that we could wear in the parade that would be specific for this kind of thing. So that's one of the things we talked about. They've already got challenge coins designed, and so there's more coming. There's going to be some events, and I'm hoping to include the Historical Society in some of this as well. I'm hoping to team up with you guys.
Are there any pictures of these uniforms?
Yeah.
I do not. I really hoped we did, but Van Horn just didn't. I don't know if he was around then.
I think I've seen a picture of it's not in color, but I think they have the red shirts.
There might be one here where they're all, but I think they're in street clothes. They're on horses in front of Hotel Divine, I think. It's one of these that's around here somewhere.
I think this one they were sitting like posing, but.
Well, if you see that, I would very much like to get a copy of that.
Because then you can go by the description.
Now, here we talk about the engine company on March 23, 1878. The engine company paraded the engine. So this is what they would do. They would just go on these parades through town, just for the heck of it. And then they would do it with other organizations as well within the city. I can't remember the name of it was a veterans group, but I can't remember the name of it. And it might still be around, but I don't think there's any in Michigan.
The Grand Army, the GAF?
Yes.
Grand Army of the Republic?
Yes, the guard group. Yeah, they would march with the guard group. They would just suddenly get up and go on parade. So they were having a good time.
There's
Wait,
one
no, they didn't have Facebook back then, so they needed stuff to do.
There's one in Sunfield and one in Eaton Rapids.
Are they still active?
They still
Yeah,
have
they have museums,
Okay.
yeah.
Probably paraded with the woodsman also.
Right.
This is one of the first talks of the fundraiser on April 12th, 1878, and that's where they talked about the plays. The Rough Diamond and Stage Trucks Yankee, and they profited almost $31 out of that. They had more uniforms and caps, discussions on that, and this is where they give a description of it though. The helmet badge would be a red and blue leather with leather letters of white spelling Waban. The badge is what, I didn't bring up but the badge is what's on the front of our helmets. Okay. It's the big leather thing on the front. So when you think of badges, you think of this, but that's.
Dave, that
Yes, that. In fact, some of you will probably remember Bud Hunt. That's Bud Hunt's house.
Oh, yeah.
And that's his jacket. They take on August 13th, 878, they talk about taking the engine to the town pump to recharge the extinguishers. So that's where the soda extinguishers must have been attached to, when you, once again, it was a pole cart. And that must be where they built it, because I've seen pictures that you guys put up about the town pump. They're at the main four corners. Now, there was the Exchange Hotel. Was that later Divine, or was that another hotel?
It was across the river.
It was across the river?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where Powers Park is.
Oh, yeah, I guess it does say it burned completely down. Now, on June 9th, 1879, this is the first time you hear them discuss new waterworks. And this is where the first talk about a municipal water supply is that right there. And then there was a major fire downtown on November 15th, 1879, where this was an Observer article, and we actually have copies of not copies, we have the article in there, in the books. They just attached them in there or slipped them in. And 10 buildings in Wooden Row on the west side of Kent Street. So it burned down 10 buildings. Unfortunately, they lost 2 saloons, and they had a lot of saloons back then. And being the Layman's and Wilcox saloons, they even knew the names. And this is the first reference of the use of hydrants. And this, apparently the waterworks, in order to get pressure, had to have a steam engine running. And we'll touch on that a little bit further down here. But at this particular fire, the steam engine was up and running, and so they had water pressure and were able to use the hydrants. On January 30th, 1880, there's an Observer article. This is where they talk about, the article mentions that it took about 30 minutes to raise enough steam for the waterworks to produce water pressure. So, the dude had to go home sometime. He couldn't leave that, you couldn't stand by that engine all day long and keep it stoked up. Well, ultimately, they did start doing that. They made sure that had pressure in case they had a fire, the fire department could use the hydrants. And as you read through this, you'll see the fire hydrants were very prone to freezing back then. And there's one reference in here when one of the schools caught on fire at one point where one of the city employees was really worried about the hydrants around the school. And he made sure that those were always free of ice, and thankfully he did, and they were able to save the school because those particular hydrants were not frozen. On June 3rd, 1881, this is the first reference where firefighters wanted to be paid for what they were doing. So that's the first reference to that. There's a first report of a fatal house fire that I read in here was on February 4th, 1882. Fire in Kearney Street. Mr. Hall was killed in the fire, it said.
That's not too far from where I live.
And then the village did agree to pay the firefighters $1 per quarter. So they got $1 every 3 months for their services. And actually, when I first started as a firefighter in Ohio in '89, and well, until I left in '98, we were paid $6 per run. Whether we were there 5 minutes or all night, you got $6. And it was intended to reimburse you for your clothes that you ruined while you were at the fire. Because you didn't ruin your clothes every time. Now on January 11th, 1884, it's the first reference to a dance, and that was held at the Opera House. And so the firemen's dance, they talked about how much it cost for the Opera House rental of the band, and then they always put in there how much they raised, and so they profited $34. Now, March 7th, 1884, they finally, the guys going inside the buildings, they started to complain. Hey, they said, we've seen pictures of other fire departments. We know they got hats. We know they got helmets. We know they got coats. We're tired of getting burned when we go in these fires. So this is the first request for something to protect the pikemen. Then later on, it explains what they do buy to protect the pikemen. Now, on August 1st, 1884, they referenced the State Firemen's Association in Charlotte. That's what all these are from, the State Firemen's Boards. There are little medals that they would get for attending it. It said where it was held and what year it was held. And those are getting in pretty rough condition. We need to find a better way to hang them. The material's getting threadbare, and they'll
there's some laying on the bottom. And then unfortunately, we broke the glass when we were moving stuff around.
How are they fastened in there?
I think I think they pinned them.
Oh,
I have no idea how many decades they've been in that box, but it's been a long time.
yeah, you can buy cases for holding them.
So, you know, in 1884, a trip to Charlotte was probably a pretty big trip. You know, I wouldn't want to ride a horse clear over there, assuming they got it on a train or something. And then on September 5th, 1884, they had another dance and it was Island Number 1. So I always like to hear about the islands. I love it when people talk about the islands. Oh, I'm sorry, they wanted to hold the dance on Island Number 1, but they couldn't, so they had to see if the Opera House was available. So that wasn't available, so they decided to have a Christmas Eve at the Hall of Bert Laswell.
What's island number 1?
Was Island Number 1 behind the library out
Yeah.
the river?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that?
And it had a big dance pavilion on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it had a bridge or something, didn't it?
There was a rope bridge to it, and
That's-
then there
yeah.
was a little tiny boat. So you could take the boat across.
Steamboat.
Yeah, steamboat.
No kidding.
We have one picture of it.
What year was it that the pavilion burned, that everything burned out there?
I don't know what year it burned.
I wonder if it was 1884, that's why they didn't have it.
So they caught it on fire in the middle of the river?
No, well, maybe at one point, but the boat burned, I think, in like 1905 or something. And I don't know when the pavilion went, but it became useless, I think, to use because they took out the dam.
Okay.
And so there was more water.
Oh, so the island wasn't as large then?
Yeah, the ice took it out, a lot of it.
Okay.
On December 19th, 1890, they started looking at what kind of coats to get, protective coats. And then on December 26th, 1890, they did make a motion to purchase leather coats. And then, let's talk about the coats for a second. We saw my latest gear downstairs. When I first started as a firefighter, well, let's back up a little bit. This is what they were wearing in the 70s and before that. These were the long coats, they had the roll-up boots. The big cities continued to wear these, Chicago, New York, right up until the gear got much lighter, because this is what we were wearing after that. And if you've got to go up 8 flights, it's really, really heavy, and this is what we started out in. And it had the layers in it, but you sweated really bad in them. And you know, now we have a layer in there up by our skin that wicks like hunting gear. It wicks the sweat away from your body. This stuff did not. I thought it was super cool because, you know, I was in my 20s and I thought I was super cool when I was wearing it. But it was not super cool. Once we started getting better gear, that's when I realized what kind of gear we were in. Now, when they first started the fire department, you know, they had bucket brigades. And these are leather buckets, and every firefighter was issued a leather bucket, and you had your number on your bucket. Because you didn't hang on to your bucket, you started passing along the line. Somebody would be at the water supply dipping it in, and you'd pass it down the line, they'd throw it on I can't imagine they saved a lot of things doing that, but that was what they had to work with. And so at the end of the night, you would go find your bucket and you would go back home. So those were our buckets. And then ultimately, over the course of time, you know, back then everything had to be really shiny. You know, everything was brass, and you would take really, really good care of it. Even when we built this station in the 1980s, we had a brass pole out there laying on the ground over there. The insurance companies ruin everything. The insurance company wouldn't let us use it anymore. So we ultimately took it out. It was more to do with the sleeping quarters. So we weren't getting exhaust into the sleeping quarters from the apparatus space, so it helped us seal it off. But we saved that. We don't know what we're going to do with it yet, but we still have it. And now all the brass railing that went along there as well. And then I talked about the SCBA downstairs. When I first started, this was the SCBA that we had. And inside the SCBA downstairs is an alarm. And so if we quit moving for no longer than, let's say, 15 seconds, this alarm starts going off. So anytime you're standing you're watching firefighters at a fire, they're always doing the butt jiggle. That's because they weren't moving and that thing was starting to, and it progressively gets louder and louder and louder, and it becomes very piercing. And that's designed so if we go down in a fire and we aren't able to save ourselves, at least we have something audible that we can follow trying to find our fellow firefighter. And these did not have that. And the regulator on the one downstairs actually fastens right to the front of your neck. So the regulator down on that one screws on right here. So that's what takes it from high pressure to low pressure, and this is all on demand. So if I take a breath, it lets air in. Now if I were to break that seal, I would start to lose air. But that's why you always have to have a good seal. That's why none of us have beards. We're not allowed to have beards in the fire department.
That makes sense.
And so when I went from this mask to that mask, so I always had this hose hanging down. You know, if you ran out of air, you could at least take this hose because your regulator was down here. And you could shove it inside your jacket, or you could punch a hole in the wall and stick it inside the wall. That gave you a little bit more air. And so then we went to this, and I thought, well, if I take that regulator off, I'm going to be dead in a matter of seconds. And so there's downsides, but you know, these are so much better than these. It was just a mental thing on my part. But these things are heavy. The one downstairs holds 4,500 pounds of air. These hold 2,216 pounds of air. It's still a 30-minute air cylinder. When they say 30 minutes, they mean you're sitting there doing nothing. I've seen guys blow through these in 7 minutes. You know, it just depends on how quick you breathe. But these things are just incredibly heavy. I did like having the regulator down here, but it's nice having it up here. And plus on these new regulators, the modern day regulators, there's heads-up displays. So there's a ring right here that I can see, that I can monitor my air supply. I've got green, I've got yellow. Once you get down to a third of your cylinder still left, it'll start to vibrate, and that's called the vibrosorber. And when that thing starts vibrating, that means you gotta go. You get out now. And if you, like in a large building, if it takes you 15 minutes to get to the scene of the fire, you gotta go right back out again. So you have to watch how long you're in there. You gotta keep in mind, it took me 10 minutes to get here. I gotta have 10 minutes of air supply left to get out. And so those are the things that go through your mind. We actually have some of these in one of the engines. They have built-in thermal imaging cameras. Those were a really cool idea when we bought them. They don't work with their crap. But you have to hold your eye just right to see through it and tilt your head up. But they're in there and they go through batteries like crazy. So, you know, some of the stuff that comes out is great and some of it's not so great. You know, it was all intended to be good. But these got us by for years and years and years. So, you know, the technology has advanced a lot. And this is the kind of thing that has historical value to it. I actually have one of those at home. You know, that I think of these, that SCBA was probably $2,000 new, and now you can buy them for $50 at a swap meet. But they did ultimately come out with PAHS alarms. But now they're built into the packs. Back then you would attach this to your pack. You would have to remember to turn it on, which we seldom did. But if you quit moving, that's what it would be. Now if you watch the footage, and so next time you see the footage of when the World Trade Center comes down and they first approach the pile, you will hear hundreds of these going off. Because every firefighter had one of those on it. And the ones that weren't smashed to smithereens are going off. And you hear all those audible alerts. So as a firefighter that was on the scene that day, that has to be something that resonates inside their mind. Because anytime you hear that, that's a bad sound. When you hear hundreds of them going off, that's incredibly overwhelming. So where we're at with that is we're getting a whole lot better with the fire service as we're going on. Now on September 16th, 1895, they talk about the resignation of retired members. That board down there, the honorary list. We do not have the names of these people from back then that were on this original honorary list. Although I think I did find it here. but I don't know if we'll ever add them back in there. On November of 1895, that's the first time they referenced, they called it the Portland Fire Department. They hadn't accepted that as a name yet, but that's the first time they called it that. Here's another good fire. Report of a fire at the Tate Building, known as the English Kitchen, to N. Stevens Building occupied by Polerio Saloon and H.J. Butler Barber, and to Tate's two-story building occupied by N.O. Spragney's Meat Market. And then all 4 buildings were partially damaged. So anytime they had something like that where they named businesses, I tried to include them. Here's where the Portland, on winter of 1904, the Portland Furniture Company, this is when that fire happened. Now in February 1905, this is the first reference to a telephone. It says the alarm was telephoned downtown. They talk about the honorary list again. On October 30th, 1907, inside here, and I didn't document every one of these, but somewhere along the line of the introduction of automobiles, some society thought, well, this gasoline is just really great stuff. It runs cars, so we can use it for heat, we can use it for cooking. Well, it was a great idea for a few years, but everything was catching on fire. Can you imagine having a gas can just sitting in your kitchen? They did. And I'm sure there was venting gas off all the time, but they were having fires all the time. They were having them in these factories, they were having them in homes, they were everywhere. Now, on December 5th, 1907, they said the phone numbers of the firemen who had phones were given to the telephone company. Ultimately, during the course of time, that was one of the dispatch ways. You know, once we had the bells, and then fire whistles came along, and then you would get you had a special phone inside your home. And the telephone company would call you, and you would listen to the message, and then you would go. Or you had someone called you, and then you had 2 people you had to call. So that's the way that would happen. That's how everybody was dispatched to the fire. And there's still a lot of communities that use the fire whistle. And then we talked about the pagers. The pager I have up, we actually went backwards a little bit, because this pager got bigger than what our last couple were. The last couple pagers were much smaller than these, but my first one was just a monster. Trying to put this on silent, sorry. There we go. My first one was just a monster. It was bigger than this, and you would catch it on everything. We had like a little holster thing we'd wear it in, and it would just bang, but it was nowhere near as big as that honker there. How would you like to have to carry that around everywhere you went? You better have an extra pair of suspenders on when you put that thing on. But the paging system changed a lot. You know, they started to do away with the whistles, and as I mentioned downstairs, we have an app on our phones now. The apps are great. I love the app. No matter where I'm at in the world, I know my fire department's out on a fire and what they're doing. On August 6, 1915, this is the first time the fire department there was any mention of a horse at all. And they talked about they were having to take a piece of equipment to the harness shop for repairs. So when they got the horses, I don't know. But on May 1915, just above that, they talk about the fire protection report. There were 60 hydrants in the city. They had 1 hose company, they had 2 wagons, they had a hook and ladder company, they had number of volunteer men were 3, number of paid men were 12, and it explained how long you had to be here in order to be, you weren't paid at first, you had to put your time in before they would start to pay you. And then the paid men were above the volunteer men. It was quite the hierarchy back then. They had 2,650 feet of hose, which is a good amount of hose. Yeah. And then the alarm system was a game well. Now game well made alarms forever. And you see the boxes like in New York City where people open them up and call in alarms. That's a game well alarm. They might still be in business. And then further up, October 4th, 1912, that's where it was changed to the Portland Fire Department. It was officially the Portland Fire Department on October 14, 1912. Now, I remember when we changed from the Portland Fire Department to the Portland Area Fire Authority, some of the old guys were going off, they were like, oh my gosh, I got all these t-shirts that say Portland Fire Department, I'm just gonna throw them in the trash now. So, you know, this is a pretty major name change here, going from Wabanaw to that. On January 29, 1917, they mentioned the Temple Theater, that they wanted to do a home talent and picture show. They really got into picture shows there for quite some time at the Temple Theater. Then they mentioned that they purchased some pictures from Van Horn. And you guys are always posting pictures from Van Horn, so he was quite the photographer back then. Then they talked about a motion picture show again in February 1918. And then on September 7th, 1919 is the first recorded automobile fire. So that's the first car fire that they had. I had something in here about electricity, and when I was cruising through here, I didn't find it, but it's in here somewhere, and that was the first report of electricity causing it.
Excuse me, they don't give the address of this White's Hospital, do they?
No, they just tell us what it is.
Figures. We're interested in the
We need to
hospitals.
know.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it is. When we're done here, I'll open up that book, go to the page, and we'll see. What page, what,
September 1919.
Page 82.
1919, I'm sorry, it was page what?
82.
82, so it'll be in this book.
Page 82, we're still 82.
We know there was one on Albro, but there was one on each side of town.
Yeah. I'll let you read the fancy print. Actually, this is pretty decent. It's just a little fancier cursive than what we were used to.
Okay.
But yeah, that's all the highlights I had right up to the year of 1920s. And then, well, excuse me, on June 2nd, 1922, that's the last meeting at the Fireman's Hall. And I know they went a little bit without actually having a fire station, and it wasn't until March 6, 1928 when the meeting started occurring at the actual fire station itself. So it took a while before they had another station. I'm not sure what happened with that, why that occurred. And there was one point in time, so I'm going to say we had 150 years of continuous service, but that's going to be a little bit of a stretch because the firefighters did go on strike one time. They got mad at the city and said, we're not going to do it anymore. And the city went without a fire department for the better part of a year. And so they ultimately came to a mutual decision. But we're still going to claim 150 years of continuous service.
What year was that? What did that?
It was very early on. In fact, I think it's in here.
Oh,
Yeah, it is in there.
Yeah. And you guys are welcome to have these. I made copies for whoever wanted them. And anyone have any questions or?
What year did they first get their mechanized fire equipment?
I would have to dig a little deeper, but I didn't find any reference to it up until that date of the 1920s. It wasn't until the very end of this that I found where they were still mentioning horses. I made the first mention of a horse. So they were hand drawing those carts for a long time. But there is a picture, and I think you guys ran something on it one time. I think it's right over there in front of Jeff, where there's a bunch of guys standing around a partial horse cart. Yeah, they were on a grass fire, and the guy said, hey, I've got one of your original horse-drawn fire engines in my barn. And they went, you what? And then the fire was getting close to the barn, and they got it out, and he gave them that horse-drawn fire engine. We do not know where it's at. None of the people in that picture, if they are still alive, are able to tell us. There's always rumors going on about that church down there that
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, down on Bridge.
The old
Who knows what's
nursery.
inside that?
Yeah, somebody said that one of our original ambulances is in the basement of that thing, and somebody said that cart's in the basement.
Wow.
But that might be town hearsay.
Bill Spencer owns it, he's still in
In
town.
what basement?
Wait, does he let anyone in?
The building,
Well, he
the
know
church
it's
down
in
there.
there,
on
yes.
Wonder how, does he go down there regularly?
I don't know, is Margie here? Margie Boynton?
No,
It's her brother-in-law, she
Could it-
lives with him.
It would be really cool to know if that was actually in there.
Sure would.
Oh, this picture here. This is the one I was referring to, I think. Is that Divine? Hotel Divine in the background there?
looks like it.
But yeah, we're not in pictures, but these are horse-drawn carts. Or wagons.
It says they're in front of the Hotel Divine.
Hi, Mark.
So when did you guys start sharing fire service with the neighboring communities? Obviously,
There was an article back when the apparatus, I think I remember reading it somewhere, about how quickly we were able to get to Ionia. They did a test run. And it was X number of minutes. Today it would have been a longer time, but I mean, it seemed long compared to today.
but obviously it was like a gas
But
engine.
I'm thinking,
Yeah,
I'm thinking
okay.
this would have been 40s,
Okay,
maybe 30s.
yeah.
Because, every city was an island of its own. You had to be self-sufficient, you had to have employers within your city, you had to have grocery stores, you had to have all that. Because no one went very far. Now look at all the World War II veterans, most of them had never been more than 5 miles from their house. And then suddenly we teach them how to fight and we send them halfway around the world. And that's how we got the interstate system. Because they kind of like travel.
Well, thank you, Dave, for this wonderful presentation. We certainly appreciate your time and effort, and we'll look forward to working with you for your big celebration.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
No, this is fine. Okay, here's okay. The old book, the old
Yeah, exactly. The mice are gonna eat it, and I said, that's just
Oh,
not.
it's up there. It's up there.
In fact, I made a lot of people mad that
Yeah, well,
I lost my temper.
after all the attempts, keeping it would be pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
This is Tommy and Don.
Tommy and Dottie's? Okay, really? Tommy and Dottie. All right, I'm gonna take my master now.
Tommy left.
Dan, I turned.
I don't have it.
There's one downstairs at the very end of the stairs.
Oh, yeah.
Be careful, because there's a step down when you come out of
And
it.
that's where my family is from, but
Bottom of
that
the
was
stairs to
8
the left.
generations ago.
Right.
Take your stuff with you.
The fire that was in 1918 at the school that you mentioned. So between 93 to
Do you remember what page it was on? 1918?
1908, yeah, it was August 1918.
It would go to somebody that does like what you did for that lot.
74.
Yeah, but somebody that has a
Page
big.
74?
Yeah. So I'm just curious, I'm not family story.
State Archive.